that build-up, no one wants to ask a question. Anyone? No? Really? Okay, not you again. Trouble.
No one else is.
Alright, go on then, Saunders. Come on, what's the
Bearing
question?
in mind it's Kleinkunst, which seems to cover everything, why is it all about gender?
Well, excuse me, for me it's not all about gender.
What are you chatting about?
Yes. My show is particularly female. I don't see any of these other shows as about gender. I think that's the way you're looking at it. For me, it's personally these people, I don't look at someone and identify them as their sex. I want to, if they've got a good show, I don't need to.
Yeah.
If it sucks, then I'm going to identify them as far worse than a boy.
Yep.
Actually, I can say something in this, which is I've been involved in the process of this from the outset, and when I did see the running order, a lot of the acts did seem to be interrogating questions of gender and representation. That's just how it panned out, isn't it? There was never, as far as I know, a conscious decision
I don't
to
see
do
it
that,
as a show about
just
gender. I see it as a show. I think if you want to see a show about gender, you need to go to a different club.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, next question. Like I said, we're really pressed for time, so we're just going to... Yes, you at the back.
Do you think Kleinkunst can exist without high art?
What the hell is high art?
Oh.
Well,
no, I don't think it can. Because certainly historically it's always drawn on high art, even if it's just parody high art. I think, if I understand the question, we do still live in an age where there is a distinction, made, rightly or wrongly, between high art and popular art and low art and things like that. So no, I don't think it can. But that's probably a much bigger... It is, as Amy's pointed out, Kleinkunst has turned into kind of an umbrella term, which was perhaps not what I was intending. But, yeah. We're going to just rattle through these. I think that's the best way. Come on! You're all creative-looking people, well-dressed.
Scared? Don't be scared. We were totally scared.
Kleinkunst. I think a lot of the time it is. Yeah. As I said before, yeah.
That's really interesting though, Dusty, because don't you think that a lot of the time, the male performers, the queer male performers have the chance of hitting the limelight? And I haven't seen anyone since Rona Cameron, who represents the ladies team, kind of hitting into the mainstream at all. And I actually think that it says a lot about how sexist and misogynist our society is, that it's great that gay men are allowed to kind of break from, God, I love Lily Savage, and she got from the Royal Vauxhall Tavern to Blankety Blank. Fantastic. But could you ever imagine a female born performer doing that, or
Ellen.
Oh, Ellen's boring though. That was ages ago. We're in the 2000s now. That was ages ago.
She's still one of the highest rating in the States.
That does not identify a contribution to art.
Why not?
If I can just go back to what I think you actually asked me, which is that yes, it can, and I think you've got to remember that historically most Kleinkunst was mainstream. Most of it was small form art, but it was populist and it was entertainment based. So there's two questions there. What are you going to say?
Well, I think it's interesting that you asked that question because it's something we were talking about backstage in the beginning of the night. And especially if we think about where we've come from just from last year to here, that this was sort of about neo-burlesque. And the fact is that right now, if you make anything that looks like, if we make a distinction, if we want to, but for the moment, between the umbrella of Kleinkunst and the idea of neo-burlesque, to be a mainstream burlesque artist right now, you must basically be Edita Von Teese. You must have a beautiful way of getting your kid off, and that's the only thing that sells. And so anything that's actually trying to say something, no, will not be mainstream. This is clear from the world.
But in what context is it ever? So talk about a political comedian or a dancer or anything that hits the mainstream. Because part of the mainstream is you have to hit a broad stroke. There has to be broad strokes.
I think there have been...
Niche is niche and broad strokes are broad strokes.
I agree with you. I agree with you, and I can name a couple. But they're not current. The last one I can think of that absolutely meets the criteria you're talking about is Lenny Bruce. And Eddie Izzard is an Annie Sprinkle, but she's not really mainstream. She's in a performance art version of mainstream. Yeah. But I actually don't think that what any of us is actually trying to do can ever be mainstream. And the only reason I would want to be is to make a living.
I'm just thinking of audiences and thinking of, all young people in the same venue, the venue would be much more having Royal Festival. Vauxhall Tavern, and actually, the Roundhouse is starting to, but it's limited. Is it, it's like...
I think...
Do you not find that a bit frustrating?
Well, I think Amy's point is that that's true of any... If I did a crazy queer opera, it wouldn't be accepted where La Bohème is. That's not specific to Kleinkunst. It's to do with culture and...
But an example with opera is Jerry Springer opera. For example, however mainstream it is, however, whether you like it or you don't like it, it became a West End Broadway transfer success. That got shut down by fundamentalist religion types, right? Now that was a success on both a mainstream level and also relatively subversive within the mainstream, within commercial culture.
When I make a show, I'm not actually making a show thinking that I'm going to make it mainstream. I don't think I'm going to make it this way or another. I have a very set image in my head of what I want my show to be. Then I choose the places that will actually allow me to do it. Yeah.
And that's the thing, so there could be two things, there can be expanding.
I've done so many corporate shows as a pretty little 1950s outfit doing a burlesque thing, and I'm just completely over it. I'd rather waitress, to be honest, and do this for my friends and for my own community to try and reinforce them, and which again reinforces myself.
And also the other thing about to talk about queer geography, write it down. The Bethnal Green Working Men's Club and the Royal Vauxhall Tavern, if you were someone on the internet and you were wanting to go and find queer culture, the good thing about those centres is you can get your ass down there by hook or by crook, whenever, and that you're probably going to finally be able to tap into those networks. So think that even though those spaces are limited, because these days we've got social networking and Twitter and everything, it doesn't, it's even with punk, probably Sniffing Glue, the fanzine, reached more people than ever saw Sex Pistols. And to me it's always the repercussions though, isn't it?
Got another question down there.
I think it's an interesting point too, because the idea that something that is subversive would be shut down by religious fundamentalists is a crazy thing as well, because they're hardly mainstream themselves.
Yeah. I'm not kicked out of a country by the Christian fundamentalists.
Well, I mean, I think what's interesting here is that the humor that makes subversiveness work is we're pointing out the things that are mutually embarrassing about society. Really, we're talking about them in that way because we can confront them in that context. But then that is kind of tempered with this other thing that people as equally unmainstream are getting offended. And it's kind of there's certain, to parody things, there are certain things that are okay and certain things that might have to go back in the closet. If somebody gets head up about something from the margins,
disagree.
People, I don't mean have to from my perspective. I mean from one thing is easier to put away than the other. Definitely.
I think there's the possibility that any one of us could get discovered tomorrow and be the next Jerry Springer, the opera, and I would welcome the money very, very happily. I think you will chat. Oh, no?
Me, okay. Yes? The academic types were talking a lot earlier about excellence. I think excellence can exist in the Kleinkunst area, and just to say, I've actually seen quite a few rubbish plays that had Arts Council funding, so...
So what are you saying about us?
Have you got Arts Council funding?
Has anyone here ever had Arts Council funding?
Yeah, in Australia.
But not here.
But that was when I was born, isn't it?
You were never.
Are you too serious?
Actually, I recently was in Australia and doing a show, and I had funding from the Australian Council and Arts Queensland, which are two funding bodies there, to explicitly create a piece of work that was queer. And as far as I know, I don't think, I mean, in Australia, when you're applying for funding, we don't have an LGBTIQ box that you tick. they don't recognise that as a type of work, so I created my own box and I ticked that box when I sent my application form in. Yes, so I have worked with some funding bodies, yes.
It's about kind of ticking the right boxes and making it fit, but it is hard if you haven't got a label like gender or disability to actually get the Arts Council funding.
It's hard to stop, I think. I don't think it makes it any easier.
No, I mean, and theatre is such a recognised form, it's still going to be another 10 years before people look at Kleinkunst and say, oh, you're a Kleinkunst practitioner, you're a cabaret singer. Oh, we know what that is.
And yet the Arts Council's top thing is, at this year for the next 5 years, is circus. So actually it does.
It's starting to.
Yeah. So there's nothing wrong with arts funding.
It's just say one more because we're going to run out of time.
Can I say something about funding as well? Forget it. We live in a post-funding era, you know what I mean? We're all running around, throwing our arms and legs in the air, listening to the Weimar soundtrack Cabaret, while the world is falling apart around us. The only thing I can say to you is make t-shirts, make badges, think of other ways that you can earn money, because the days of having it handed out to us on a plate only lasted a very short amount of time and they've gone, unfortunately. Sorry.
I just like to say I'm self-funded and I will do whatever it takes to put my art on a stage where I don't have to answer to anyone that's funding me. And that includes throwing, let's say, not my arms up in the air most of the time.
We just have one more very quick question.
I will. Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say actually, with regards to all the funding stuff, that's right. And mainstreaming with it, rather, the mainstreaming. Many years ago on Channel 4, there was a cabaret series in the evening. I can't remember what it was called now. It was fronted by Simon Drake.
The Secret Cabaret.
Thank you. That was really good, but and that was lost in the sort of light entertainment era. Until now, we have like a, what is it called? The
Britain's Got Talent.
Britain's Got Talent. Yeah, you laugh. However, that is giving a stage for those people for whom who would not otherwise have had a mainstream audience. But having said that, also recently there was a burlesque performance on it, I believe, and the nipple tassel came off, and there was a big, and there was a big furor in the papers about this, and it just struck me that maybe, on the one hand, we would want to bring this onto the mainstream, but maybe the mainstream isn't ready. Yeah. So it might have experimented with it before, and now.
I would suggest, as someone who does this for a living and has done for a long time, I think you can't put Kleinkunst on television because the whole point is you're in the room with the person. As soon as it's on TV, it's television, which is different. So do we just have one last comment for anybody, and then we're going to have to wrap up? Sorry, everybody.
I get really worried when the corporate world wants to hire me.
I also don't think that you may have heard a lot of the artists that perform in retro burlesque, burlesque, neo burlesque, cabaret, neo cabaret, Kleinkunst events. They don't kind of want to be in a mainstream. They don't even want to perform in a mainstream. They don't want to work in that way. A lot of us have probably come from the mainstream, and we found maybe work or not work, but in another sense or in another way, we've come here and we found another more enjoyable part of ourselves, which we can express live in a live event with other people in a space.
Can we wrap it up there? Can I please reintroduce the lovely Jay Stewart?
Just to say thank you to all the participants in tonight's event. One more time, thank you. We've got 5 minutes and we have got evaluation forms. So if we can get them passed around, and also the keep in touch forms. Just to say what's happening now, the bar is open until 11 o'clock. We're going to get rid of you as soon as we can so we can strike everything tonight. And I've been told by the lovely Layla that there's a guest list tonight at Proud Gallery, which is down the road in the stables, and it goes on a little bit later. That's my bedtime, but anyway. And the password is Neo Burlesque. So, password, and you'll get in there and have a really fantastic evening. evening. Thank you very much for all your attention.